So in the context of your journey, 36-year journey in business, I'm curious to get an understanding on both the highs and the lows. Obviously, you've learned a lot. You mentor business owners and entrepreneurs in this space. What would you say from your experience has been just one of the biggest things that you've learned about business in general?
I guess for me, the biggest thing I've learned about business is it's a completely and utterly a direct result of who we are and how we show up. And if we are weak in some area, weak leader, if we've got doubt around whether we're worthy to have success or any of those things, it's directly proportional to the amount of success we'll create. And if we don't work on ourselves, we don't grow ourselves, and the business just simply isn't going to grow.
Did you have some of those stories and beliefs and I'm not worthy or I'm not good enough or I can't be a leader when you started?
No, I didn't have. I had all of them. and probably a few of them on steroids as well, where I would have the I'm not worthy or I'm not good enough or I don't understand how to do this, or it might be, why would somebody listen to me? Particularly because I did a lot of stuff at a lot younger age than many other people. So the age part was it. I'm not old enough for this. People are not going to respect me. There was lots of those stories going on. But what I had to focus on was continuing that journey of growth and personal development to be able to become that version of myself and continue to do that to this day. In the last, at the time of us, doing this interview, is the last 2 years has been a massive growth opportunity for me in some situations that I've gone through and huge realizations. Some of the fastest and most impactful growth has happened pretty much in the last 6 weeks for me.
If you go back to where you started, maybe post the teen years, but when you started to get into, serious business and serious leadership as well, what would you tell your younger version of you, early mid-20s, that guy that maybe wasn't as sharp, and had a couple of rougher edges? What wisdom would Sean now pass to that younger Sean?
Stop listening to other people. Listen to yourself. Trust yourself. You actually know a hell of a lot more than you think you do. And when you feel something is off, it probably is. I realise that I have that perceiving things is a very strong skill of mine, being able to perceive what's going on, but the lack of confidence or certainty in my ability to push back against more dominant personalities and things like that meant that I'd let it slide. I'd kind of people please more and stuff because it's like, I'm not feeling this is right, but I don't have the experience that person has. They've got 10 years on me. But what I actually knew then, which I found out, years later, was what I was thinking and feeling was right, but I didn't trust myself. So I'd actually go back and say, you need to trust what you actually feel and believe is right and back yourself 100%.
So how do you overcome that though? Because I think now more than ever, there's a million voices saying, you need to do this, you need to scale, you need to consolidate, you need to focus on your numbers, you need to be sales focused. How do you overcome that to the person that says, well, I'm just surrounded by people telling me what to do?
So for me, the difference was finding somebody that had the experience but was also neutral, so didn't have their own agenda in the situation. Because a number of my earlier mentors were also business partners. So they had an agenda that wasn't just about supporting me. So if you can find somebody to support you that doesn't have an agenda other than supporting you, because they don't have a vested interest, and they're not like, no, I don't think that's right, but you need to do this, because they're looking at their financial and their balance sheet and their P&L as well, because then it's distorted, the view is distorted. So find people that you trust and respect that are going to reflect back to you and help you to build that certainty and confidence.
I'm curious if you go to some of your failures, because everyone talks about the successes, everyone talks about we 7x'd in 2 weeks and now we're all bajillionaires.
I'm going to say there's kind of one big failure that's made up of a number of smaller ones, and I'll start with that same concept of not trusting myself is one of the first failures. Actually, not listening to my intuition and what I knew deep down was right. The other thing was doing the same thing for years and for over a decade and expecting a different result, right? Because I didn't have the confidence or certainty more so than confidence, because I believe confidence can be faked, but certainty is a state of being, that I didn't have the certainty to actually say no and say, no, I don't agree to that. I'm not going ahead with that. I want to do it this way. And that whole piece led to pretty much a decade of doing the same thing, getting the same result. And after building a business up, it was growing rapidly. We were doubling every year for like 3 years or 4 years, and then the global financial crisis happened back in 2008, 2009, and that took the kneecaps out from under the business. And it was a huge blessing in disguise because it gave me an opportunity to reset, because everyone had to reset then. So it gave me an opportunity to step up and actually take some control back. And what it was that I needed to step back from that monster that we'd created, because after 10 years of effort and doing 80+ hour weeks, feeling depressed half the time, because I actually had depression for over a decade as well in that period. I was physically unhealthy. I was substantially heavier. I just ate crap all the time. I drank soft drink, multiple cans of soft drink every day. I was just, having those V's or Red Bulls and things just to keep me going in the afternoon.
High performance nutrition.
High performance nutrition, absolutely. And it was just this cycle. And that was a huge failure, is not actually addressing that soon enough. And there was clearly some other stuff going on, emotional things I needed to work on that were contributing to that. But what I realised is I walked away after that 10 years with 657 grand worth of debt and 157 of it on credit cards. That was my outcome of 10 years of my life in those businesses, basically, is what I ended up. And when the GFC came along and that gave me an opportunity to reset everything, that's when I started to dig myself out a hole, but very, very quickly, because I'd realised I had learnt all the lessons. And that was my cost of admission. My price of admission was, as they say, it takes 10 years or more to become an overnight success. And then it started to happen. And I scaled back some of those, got out some of those businesses, cut off some partnerships, doubled my personal income. Now, it wasn't enough to sustain me before, but now it was. It's back in the black. Then sold a legal practice we owned, which was one of the best things I've ever done. Anyone's owned a legal practice, lawyers sue each other on the weekend for fun. So we got sued a few times, and not from our own doing, but from mistakes, human error that lawyers had made. But I sold that as well, and then my personal income doubled again. And I was working less than 15 hours a week. So I started to realise this concept of working smarter, not harder, was actually a real thing. And so that 10 years of, people say, would you go back to 25 and with what you know now? I'm like, well, I couldn't, because I wouldn't know what I know now, and I couldn't do what I do now without going through that pain and challenge and difficult period. It's just the period that it took me to actually embed the learnings so I can teach it to other people as well.
Give me some context on the industries that you've traversed and some of the lessons or the insights that you've gained from being in such diverse industries and businesses. Yeah,
well, as you said, I've been in multiple industries, starting off doing very small businesses, very young age, having a car wash cafe and then a mobile car wash and making hundreds of dollars, 36, 37 years ago.
All cash too?
All cash, it was, yes, all cash. As a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old. And then I had a aircraft business. We had 3 light airplanes with with 2 family members, and then I moved into the finance space because someone was like, I was really, you're good with numbers and stuff. I'm like, cool, okay, what can I use numbers for? Finance, okay, cool. So I got into the finance space, and then it built from there. I was contracting to somebody else doing some stuff with them to set up their finance arm, and then I realised that their values weren't aligned with mine. So eventually I jumped and started my own. So then we went to finance, and then we expanded to, property and finance, they kind of go together. People buy properties, they need finance. Then we're like, well, actually, a guy that I know wants to kind of join us, so let's bring his legal practice in that does conveyancing and property law. So that related, and we kind of then got that, and then we got insurances, and we got, that legal practice expanded to business succession and estate planning, got bigger and more complicated.
And it became the beast.
And it became part of the beast, right, where it had 10 different trading entities at the same time, spread so thin, couldn't do anything well. Like, if you ever tried to do 10 things at the same time, you're not going to do them very well, right? So if you're trying to play 10 sports, you're never going to be professional at any of them. It was the same thing in business. But from that, it was like the lessons that happened, they'd happened very, very quickly, though, because I was exposed to so many different industries. There are commonalities across all of them. The only difference is the widget they sell. Whether it's a service or a product, it doesn't matter, but team culture is the same. Financials are the same. The market is the same. Effectively, you have people. You need to convince them that this is a great opportunity for them and they need to buy from you. All that was the same. The only difference was the matter expert. So I could run those businesses without being a matter expert, because being a business owner, you don't have to be the matter expert. You go back to that thing they talk about with Henry Ford, how he got taken to court by somebody because he didn't know everything about all the areas of his business. But he goes, well, I don't have to. I pick up this thing called a phone, I press this red button, and I ask one of the engineers, how do you do blah, 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 blah? How do you build the engines? And they'll tell me the answer. So why do I need to know that?
So how would you say that that's informed your approach to business now, which is very much of, if you want to create a freedom business, you don't have to be the subject matter. I think a lot of small business owners really struggle with that. Your perspective is different. You don't need to know. In fact, maybe you shouldn't know.
I actually do believe that, is that if you are the matter expert, you're always going to get pulled back in, right? So one thing that I wouldn't do, and acquiring businesses has been a bit of a hobby of mine, and I'll be doing more of that in the coming years ahead as well, because I think it's a great opportunity in that space. But I'm going to be acquiring businesses where I can't be on the tools. I can't be the matter expert, because it stops me from then potentially sticking my hands in and getting my hands dirty. Whereas I need to come up with a different solution. It's that, that 10x approach versus a 2x approach is, okay, I need to solve this another way. Do I need to contract somebody in for a while till we replace that person with an employee? Do we need to make sure we've got redundancy within the team? So I can do that from a strategic place, not from an operational place, which means I'm still in the $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 an hour area of operation, not the $25 to $50 an hour.
So I want to go back to the beast that sounds like it was killing you slowly, maybe not that slowly. How do you go from a business with 10 trading entities, multiple streams of income, multiple different client avatars? I imagine at that point you were doing 7, probably close to 8 figures in revenue, to then GFC, $600,000 of debt, more than 150 on the credit cards. How do you recover from that?
Good question. I kind of don't know when I think about it. When I go back to then and go, holy crap, because I felt like I was a failure. I'd attached it to my identity, that not that I had failed at those businesses and allowing myself to not stand up for what I believed was right, that I had failed, that I was a failure. And so that took some time to get over. I needed to get support. I had, psychotherapy, psychologist, hypnotherapy, energy work and stuff like that I've done to help me move through a lot of those emotions, because they were very, very heavy. And if you looked on paper and you looked at the situation, it looked like I was a failure. But what I've realised in hindsight is that I didn't fail. I learnt, and I learned a whole of a lot. And those lessons then accelerated my growth later. So I had to use them as a springboard to move forward. But I needed the support. I couldn't do it myself. I'd been doing it myself up until that point, and it nearly broke me. Well, it probably did break me. I would get sick 6, 7, 8 times a year, like clockwork, every 4 to 6 weeks, because my nutrition was terrible, my stress levels were up, my nervous system was running at 13 all the time. I didn't sleep well. I was immersed in this beast all the time. It was all consuming. I didn't have any hobbies left because it was just the business, just to survive. That wasn't even to move forward. That was just to keep my head just above water so I didn't drown. But it required me to actually go, you know what? I need some help. Can somebody help me to move through this?
So, but how do you reconcile that though? Because I think Australia especially is notorious for, the old TP syndrome, tall poppy. If there was someone that was in your position, again, if you go back to younger Sean that's pumping the 80-hour weeks and is living on Red Bull and thin air, what would you say to cut through that tall poppy and actually get to the core of, mate, you can't do it yourself. You actually need help. Is there anything that Sean would have actually listened to at that point, or did you have to just run into the brick wall, to get that lesson?
I think I thought that I was getting support, but again, there was a conflict of interest. That the people I was getting support from were my business partners, or particularly a business partner. And that's not downplaying or talking badly about them. That was the nature of what it was. And I didn't see that dynamic then. Had I had somebody like that who was external, who didn't have that agenda running, then I think that would have helped me to make changes sooner. But also, it may not have, because I needed to go through my journey. It was my journey. And for some people, they can create success in 3 to 5 years. Other people, it takes 20 years. Other people never actually get it because they haven't actually done the work internally to become the person they need to be to create what it is they want to create. Because their experiences and their interpretation of those experiences, they create belief systems, that they generate stories, that creates then someone's identity, the I am statements, that I am this, I am a failure, I'm not good at this, and I'm never going to amount to anything, or whatever. And often they're not that person's voice. It's often somebody else's voice they're actually hearing coming out of their own mouth or bouncing around their own head, but they don't realise it because it sounds like their voice, right? So then that identity drives our actions, and those actions drive the outcomes. So if our identity is negative, and we're stuck in that identity of I am a plumber rather than I own a plumbing business, or I am just this, or I'm not good at that, then your decisions are based on that identity. And so you're going to make weak or lower risk decisions because you don't have the confidence or certainty to be able to execute. Whereas if you shift that identity and say, you know what, I'm someone who's learning and developing. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm the most successful person in the world. You can stepping stone the identity change and shift it to, I am somebody who is on the path to becoming successful, rather than I'm not worthy or I'm never going to amount to anything. You can start to shift that identity. Now, when you start to shift that identity, it starts to change the actions you take. So when you start to shift that, I'm someone that's doing this, well, you might wake up in the morning and do one thing differently that's now taking a step forward. And then that outcome slightly changes and you're like, oh, hang on, that outcome's different. And so then your identity, you go, I'll go back again. Actually, I can feel now that I'm this person. You're more confident. So 2 or 3 more actions start to happen. So the outcomes start to accelerate. And that's when you get that snowball effect, because it starts and ends with identity. And as I always say, is we're both the accelerator and the handbrake. But if you've got the accelerator down and the handbrake's up, you can spin in a circle, burning all this fuel and energy, making a lot of noise and smoke, but actually not going anywhere. But we've got to get that handbrake down, which is our internal belief system, stories, identity, because it's driving the actions that we take.
What are some of the things that you believe about business, running a successful business, becoming a successful business person?
Well,
what are your beliefs?
Well, the first thing is never about the how. You can have the manual, which is otherwise known as Google or Wikipedia or YouTube. You've got the manual. But why isn't everyone a raving success in the context of creating a business that's booming and profitable and that don't have to work in it, free, as we call it, a freedom business? People are not, because it's never about the how. It starts with the why. Why are you doing it in the first place? Because if your why is weak, you're not going to put in the effort. You're going to do a half-assed approach, half-baked, not do it, and you're going to get that result, a half-baked result. If you've got a why, a purpose driving you, you're going to put in 110% effort. You're going to start to see some results. But I guess some of the things that that I've learned, and also in mentoring thousands of business owners over the last 17 or so years now, is that, again, it starts with us, starts with our belief systems, which drive our actions, which then give us the outcome. We need to move away from the doing it ourselves methodology. I can do it better than anyone else. That's probably right. Do I think I can do a lot of things that I do better than other people? Yes. But one past mentor said to me, if you can do things at 110 or 120%, Sean, than most people, which you can, because you've got a very high capacity to do that, what if you've got 5 people doing it at 80? That's 400%. They're still doing more than twice what you're doing, 3 times what you're doing. Is that not better than you trying to do it all yourself? And it came from that belief system. Many people have it. This story of, like, that came from my dad, and which I gave it back to him. I thanked him and I gave it back to him, which is, if you want something done, do it yourself, because it'll be cheaper and you'll do it better. That was that served him. Baby boomer, coming out of that era, that served him well. And it wasn't until I was nearly 30 when I realised, hang on, that's not my belief. That's yours. So I thanked him and I gave it back. And I went to now delegating. How do I delegate the things that I don't like first, or I'm not good at, or that aren't a good use of my time? So that was a big lesson, is the faster you can delegate, the faster your business will grow. The faster you learn to become a leader, because you have to, you've got more people to lead, alongside getting support in how to lead. Don't just jump in and do it, because then it'll fall apart. You'll hire bad people. You don't understand how to build a good culture. You'll have people that are arguing and probably taking the mickey out of you and the business. You've got to grow and develop that, and that skill of leadership is another one. You have to know who you are as a leader. For me, my definition of leadership, which is a process we do with all of our inner circle members and our investor boardroom members, is what is your definition of leadership, which is the skin that you wear. It's not a role that you play. That's what somebody would say about you if they were giving a eulogy at your funeral in the future, right? And mine is humble, authentic, and vulnerable. That's who I aspire to be. Now, when I set that about 7 or 8 years ago, I wasn't that. In some areas I was, but I was aspiring to be much, much stronger at that. And it took me a few years to realise, when I started getting people reflecting back those 3 words for me, to say that oh, I can see that you're so humble, or I love how you're really authentic, and I love how you share vulnerably. And I started to see that reflected back. So I was like, hang on, if people are seeing that, I'm showing up as that, which means they know who I am as a leader, which means they know who they're following. If you're trying to lead people, you don't know who you are as a leader, and if one day you come and you're like, yeah, let's do it, guys, it's all great. And the next week you're like, oh, I'm upset about something, this client didn't go ahead, and they're just going to lean back and be like, this guy is unsafe.
Right?
Yeah. The inconsistency and emotional inconsistency is unsafe psychologically. It's baseline programming. It's going to have us leaning back. Whereas if people know who they're following, they can either be on board, and if you've got a purpose or why, they can join that, or they can not, right? What makes a great business is doing the business basics consistently to the point that they're freaking boring, and then doing it again and again and again and again. That's a good business, because then you hire people to do the boring stuff. Then you go up a level, do the next level of strategy. And then when that starts getting a bit boring, but it's consistent and it's now embedded in the business, you hire people to do that, and then you step up another layer.
So, but what do you think when you see, because I see it too, business owners all the time trying to jump onto the latest fandangly thing when there's blatantly obvious things that they could be doing that they're not doing that would build a better business.
Just watching that, but what it is, I understand it though. I don't so much. I used to get frustrated more because I would, I suppose, immerse myself too much into that person's business rather than looking at it from a more mature, third-party perspective. And now I look at it and say they don't understand the basics. Because when you set up a business, it's like, Eric, you're starting a business in architecture. Cool. Here's your bank account, your tax file number, and your ABN. Good luck.
All the best.
Good luck. That's it. You're a great architect, but that's it. Because people don't understand that business, you should have to do some sort of course on business to start a business. That's why most of them fail. You go to uni for 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, 8 years, depending on what profession you want to get into, to learn all these basics before you then go and apply them. And then you apply some of them while you're still learning, right? In business, you jump off the cliff and go, oh crap, I've got to build an aeroplane before I go splat at the bottom. But I have no idea how to do it, but I've just got to try and work really hard and harder and harder and harder to try and figure it out. That's not how it works. You've got to go back to the basics. And with what we teach is a handful of very structured, very clear basic tools that people use every single quarter in that quarterly cycle of repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat every single quarter. Because then once it becomes, again, the DNA of a business, the team are aligned to it. They understand what it is. There's consistency. You can have then specialised people in roles that take and champion things like strategic planning and execution and things like that, which are very weak in just about every single small business. But having that structure and that order that is simple and repetitious is incredibly powerful. And there's one thing that that in our business that I said a few months ago was, right, guys, one thing we're going to be doing is I want to cut 20% of what we're doing by the end of the year. 20%. We don't need to do it. I want to just cut it.
Just cut the crap.
Right? Cut it out. Not to mention that I scared the living daylights out of everyone when I took our mission and our base camp that we used for what we wanted to achieve and went highlight, delete, and just deleted all of it and started again. Someone said, you should write a book because, and I was like, well, that makes sense. And so we had it on there for a couple of years that Sean should write a book, and I was like, I actually don't want to write a book. I have no interest in writing a book because for what I do, I don't want to use it as some, BS lead magnet thing to attract clients, right? Because that's pretty much why people were saying to write the book. And for me, it was like, you know what? That's not my jam at this point. Maybe I will in the future. But I'm like, I don't think the book that's in me is ready to come out, if there is one, right? And there may be, there may not be. But for me, it was like there was all these things on there that were nice to haves, not must haves. There were some must-haves, but it was filled with all these extra nice-to-haves. And I mean, how it's become so much clearer and simpler now that we've gone, we're doing this, this and this. You need to do less. And we're doing more now as a business with basically half the team that we had before because we simplified it, which means that it's an easier business. It means our culture is a lot more aligned and connected. And there's one thing I want to touch on, which has been coming up while we've been talking a few times, which is there's the statement that people say, what's the number one asset you have? And people say, it's time. Well, it's not. Because Elon Musk has the same amount of time. What has he created? 4 multi-billion-dollar businesses, right? The same amount of time that we have. It's not time, it's attention. It's where is our attention going? Now, if our attention is going on Facebook marketing and website and this and dealing with this customer complaint and building new products and doing this and this, we have like 5%, if that, of any of our potency, our energy, or our drive focused on one thing, right, at a time. Whereas if we could get 60, 70, 80 or 100% for a short period of time, focused on one thing, imagine how much further we can move that forward. Because we're all trying to do too much stuff. And it's hard, it's heavy, it wears us out. Our brain is trying to bounce between multiple things, consuming part of its focus and attention on the bouncing bit between things. Because as humans, we cannot multitask. It's proven, scientifically proven in studies, we cannot multitask. And whilst women are marginally better, I think it's 0.2% better, still can't multitask, right? It's a human condition. That if we focus on one thing, 100%, great. Focus on two things, we've got 40% on each and 20% is bouncing. We then split it to three. More of our energy and our attention is being wasted. So we need to look at what am I doing right now? Is my attention on something that's actually moving the needle, is driving us forward? Or am I just doing the thing that's easy, comfortable, because that other thing is making me feel a bit uncomfortable? So I'm just going to go back to doing the invoicing, right? Because I don't have to call that person back to follow up a sales call because it makes me uncomfortable. But if you want to be successful, the biggest differentiator, now that we've identified this, there's one thing, is a person has to have made the decision. The decision that I am going to create the success that I'm actually after. If you haven't made that decision yet, close your door, pack it up.
What if you're in the game of business and you haven't made that decision? In my eyes, that's probably going to lead you to a place where you have a beast of a business where you're working 80 hours a week and you've got 10 different trading entities, and then one thing comes out of the blue that you don't expect, which is always going to happen, and you get completely bamboozled and taken back to zero. Well,
like they say,
beyond zero.
You have a shit business and make it bigger, you have a big shit business, right? But this time the holes are big enough to drive a truck through. So when something sideswipes you, it's going to hurt a lot more. And so if you are in business and you haven't made that decision yet, and usually it's because someone's focusing on, I don't know how, right? That is the number one problem, is if people think that the decision is based on how, they're failing straight away. They're always going to fail at that attempt. The how will come once you have made the decision, because then nothing's going to stand in your way. I am doing this, rather than, one day I hope to possibly, maybe should, actually kind of get there. And this is and you hear this in people's language, you hear it all the time. And it's like we've got to get people to focus on either step it out, and most of the time you step out and go and get a job, you'll probably make more money and there'll be less stress. So if it's too hard, get out and do that. Otherwise, find out a way to make the decision. And sometimes that will be working with someone to help you get to that point and actually make that decision. Because once you've made it, you will become unstoppable. You will do the things that were uncomfortable before, because you know what? Well, if I don't do this, I don't create that. I've decided to go there, so I don't have a choice. I'm already on this train track.
So simple.
Yep.
So being on the other side of having made that decision for you, and you've had quite an interesting business career. You've started multiple businesses, acquired multiple businesses. You've got minority stakes and investments in other businesses. Take me to the flip side. Take me to some of the wins. What are some of the biggest, the biggest celebrations in your business career to date?
For me, it actually comes down to the people that I've met, the people I have around me, the friends that I've made, the experiences I get to have. We do our events every quarter with some incredible people coming together, every 90 days to learn and grow and develop, who are values aligned. I've got the deepest and most impactful friendships I've ever had in my life, through what I do. Yes, have I created financial success in the meantime? Well, of course, but if that went tomorrow and I still had my friends left and I was renting a house and driving an older car, my definition of success is the freedom to choose and the impact I have on those around me. I would still have freedom to choose and I'd still be able to make an impact on those around me, right? And for me, my highest value is deep connection. So I'd still have value. I'd still feel successful in myself, because success is not a destination. It's a state of being. Yeah,
but don't you want to be on a private jet for your Instagram and like a rented Lamborghini and putting everything up there?
I don't look at, people say, you got to strive to be happy. Well, I think happiness in my eyes is fleeting. It comes and goes, right? What I reference it is joyful contentment. It's a state of joy where you could walk along and notice that you've got a smile on your face for no reason. You're just there. And I noticed that the other day. I was walking along near the river near my house, and I realised that I had a smile on my face, because every time someone walked past, they smiled at me. I'm like, everyone's been nice today. And then I realised it was me. They were reflecting me back. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But it is, it's not about the money. The money is important, don't get me wrong, right? Because one of the things that we work on is we call our freedom metric. And one of those numbers is our freedom time and our freedom money. Because in a business, we create more profit in a business. We can then hire more resources and buy more resources, which give us more time. Once we've got more time, we can focus on producing more profit to ultimately get us out of that business. Because what my goal is to move people from being stuck in their business to having a business they can choose to work in or not within 3 years or less, because that is possible. Because business is a system. If you remove all the noise and the BS and the AI rubbish and the latest Facebook marketing campaign and actually focus on the business basics and do them well, 95% of business owners can get there if they've made that decision within that 3-year period. And that, to me, is the impact I see on other people, how it's changing their lives, how the feedback I get, how it's changed their kids' lives. They've got having more experience as a family. They're able to travel now. They haven't had a bloody holiday in 4 years, and now having a month off and travelling, and they're like, holy man, this is amazing, And that's the why. The why is experiencing more. We don't need more. Because whether you have a Honda or a BMW or a bloody Aston Martin, right? Yeah, some of those are nice to haves, but if you drive it every day, it just becomes a car. People, it's a lovely car. Yeah, it is good, but it loses its shine because you've now got it. It's almost this. Well, there's this. Yeah, it is. It's like you want something, but when we get it, it's now no longer enough. We now want the next thing, and that's this Instagram kind of materialistic world we live in. Is I just bought a iPhone 15, and you're like, the new one, iPhone 16 came out today, and now I feel inferior.
Back down.
I'm like, I just bought it yesterday, but one day later I'm now inferior because you've got the new one. Is it any different to what I had yesterday? It's not. There's not one person that I've seen the definition of success say, I want a big house, a Lamborghini private jet, right? The definition of success, like with mine, the freedom to choose and the impact I have on those around me. It's got nothing to do with how much I make. The more impact I have on those around me and the more choice I have, the more successful I feel. And a byproduct of that is who I'm showing up as, means my actions are different, which means that also my financial situation has an opportunity to grow. But that's a secondary piece for me. That's not the primary driver. That's a bonus, right? And of course, I was talking about it before, the freedom time and the freedom money. Is the freedom money bit is if you could live a comfortable life where you didn't have to work and you had enough coming in. I'm talking about the Jay-Z lifestyle. I'm talking about, and a lot of people, it's kind of around that $300,000, $400,000 a year. They could have their kids in private school. They could holiday a few times a year, could live in the house they want to. They could drive nice cars and stuff like that, right? You only probably need consistently every year coming in 3, 4, maybe 500 grand for most people. And in most small businesses, you can get there in 3 years. To have a small business doing 500 grand a year, most small businesses only need to be doing $1.2 to $2 million in revenue. That's not a big ask. You don't have to have a $10 million business and a BHAG, this big, hairy, audacious goal, and which is this irrelevant crap that you actually don't want or need. It's like, imagine waking up in the morning. You've got a really nice house. It's probably not 100, or 1,000 square metre mansion with 6-car garage and all this sort of crap. That doesn't make you happy. What makes you happy is being able to choose what you do next. Being able to choose who you do things with, when you want to do them, and how often you want to do them. That is where freedom and the feeling of freedom and success comes from, in my view, is having choice. If you love your business, go and work in it. But you know how you'll relate to it then? Is you relate to it in a very different way, because you don't have to be there. You choose to be there. You'll choose to play roles in your business you want to, and have team that play the other roles. And if you want to step out completely, hire people, train them up, and step out completely.
So what would you say to someone who's maybe been in their business for 10 years, 15 years, and they see this dude in a nice black shirt saying, you can build a freedom business in 3 years? That's rubbish. There's no way you can do that. What would you say? You
believe you can or believe you can't, you're right. But what I say is, have other people done it? And they cannot answer no to that question. Other people have done it. We've had people in Inner Circle do it in 2 years. How did they do it? They made the freaking decision, and they took the action, and they didn't just blindly follow what we've said. What they've done is like when I have a conversation with somebody and they've made that choice, they process it first and go, let me just consider that. And then what they do is they embody it. They don't just plug it in, because plugging it in is kind of like it's still a separate attachment, right? They actually assimilate and embody this new way of doing things. And so let's talk, say, financials, right? People, it's one of the biggest things that people are scared of. And, we've got a few members that have been like, I didn't really want to do this financial deep dive process that you do when we start working with you, Sean. And I was really scared of it because I'd look like an idiot and I was never good with numbers at school. And 6 months later, these people are going, here's my financials, I reviewed this, and I'm actually looking to buy this business, and I've done a bit of a review on that. This is what I've picked up, and one of our members recently, and in 6 months, her level of confidence to actually now consider buying another business, because she understands the financials, has gone through the roof. Because remember, people where they are now, they're like with blinkers on. They're in almost in a box. They can't see what's written on the outside. They need to get out of the box to read the instructions on the outside. Right? So if they're stuck in that box, they need help to get out. And then they need guidance as to how to actually do it, because the way they're doing it now may be the 2x, the linear, where they're going, okay, to be twice as profitable, I need to do twice as much, have twice as many clients, have twice as much BS going on, headaches
Twice
and
as
stress.
many
So therefore,
team.
subconsciously I'm going to avoid it because my relationship with my wife or husband is suffering. I've never seen my kids. I don't even know who they are when I walk in the door. They always look older, and I think they're someone else's kids. Whatever it is, right? Which is common in business is the time. No time is very, very common. It's one of the biggest pain points. But if you then have the ability to go, right, have somebody look into your business and say, this is where you are, this is why you handbrake. But you know what? You don't have to go this way through all this treacherous, there's actually a nice path, a paved 4-lane highway with no one on it that you didn't know that existed. You just got to go down here, turn left, turn right, and then you're on it. And people are like, holy crap, I didn't know that existed. And that's that thing about people not knowing the business basics. When you know them, you can't unknow them. It's like chopping a tree down with a bloody butter knife and someone going, hey, how about you use a chainsaw? And this is how you use it. This is how you sharpen it. And this is how you put petrol in it. You think you're going to cut those trees down quicker. And then when you master that, it's like, here's some keys to the bulldozer that's parked behind the shed. That'll knock 10 trees down in one go rather than one at a time. It's just that belief system needs to be that you don't actually know. The reason why you're saying, it can't be done is because you just don't know how yet, right? But the how is not it. Decide first, come back to the how. Somebody else who's done it before, and why I say we are mentors and not coaches is because a mentor is somebody who's done it before. They've tripped over that log 29 times and their face shows the wounds from it, right? Whereas they see someone trip over it first or second or third time, they're like, hang on, let me help you move that. This is how you do it. And then that person moves forward much faster. So find people that actually have credibility. They haven't learnt it from a book. 2-week course, I've become a business coach and I'll sign you up for 2 years. But and let's start with chapter 1. Well, chapter 1's not my problem. Well, I don't know how to do anything but chapter 1 first because that's what I was taught, right? You need to go to somebody that actually knows what they're talking about, somebody who's got a proven track record of getting people down this journey. And those people are the same. When people come to us, they're usually in what we call stage 3 and 4 of the 6 stages of the business. They're going from business doer, trying to move to business owner, where they're going from doing everything, and the business is like another head on their shoulders, and it's having a good day, they're having a good day. Business is having a bad day, they're having a bad day, right? Into the business owner, where they're now starting to move to working on the business and not in the business day to day. They're less operational, more strategic. That's generally where people start to make because that's the biggest pain point. They get stuck there and it's like, I've got to do something different. And when the pain of doing nothing becomes greater than the pain of doing something, you take action. But what you want to do is bring that point sooner. Don't burn through more time than you have to by getting somebody else to support you to assess where your business is at.
What's the best way that someone can bring that pain forward so they can take action? If they're in a place where they're working big hours, they're kind of on the treadmill is going fast enough to keep them on there, but they're not running so fast that they can actually get to the end and get off the treadmill.
And the faster they run, the faster the treadmill goes.
How does someone get themselves out of that predicament where they feel like they've got no time, no energy, no attention? They know they need to do something different.
I'll say this in a loving way. They've got to get over themselves. They've got to make a choice to say, I'm ready to hear the truth, right? Then find somebody that they respect that can call them on their BS, because that's all it is. This person is running BS stories in their head, telling them they can't get off the end of the treadmill. But you know what happens on a treadmill if it's going really fast? You jump to the sides. You put your feet on the sides. But people don't know that in business. And then the treadmill can go as fast as it wants, and you can just stand there. It can go twice as fast. It can go 100 times as fast. and you can just watch it happening. That's the thing. It's about moving to a place where you can watch what's happening in your business rather than being controlled by what's happening in your business.
I suppose part of the challenge is that a lot of business owners, they are the, proverbial biggest fish in their pond. It's very easy to find yourself in an echo chamber where you're either around, only your team, who you're clearly the one in the power dynamic, so they're not going to tell you, you're doing a pretty shit job around this business, or you're around other business owners that are just as stressed, just as tired, just as overworked.
We need to be very cautious with who we take information from. They need to have the actual experience in what it is we want to create, because otherwise it is just an opinion. And be very cautious of whose opinions you take on board, because that's the best way to screw up where you're heading or to slow you down in that sense. And I honestly feel that most people, they don't have a community around them. They don't have people around them that are on the same journey, that will lift them up. And there's a saying that you are the sum of the 5 people you spend most of the time with. Have a think about, who do you spend most of your time with, right? If they're not people lifting you up, if they're people saying, oh, you shouldn't hire someone now because we're going to go into a recession or whatever it is, right? Oh, let's listen to that person's opinion. They've got a business half the size of mine, or they call it a business, but it's really a hobby. They're still working a job somewhere else, and they're giving me advice around that. And it's like, well, no, I believe that hiring someone's going to free me up, and there's more millionaires made in a downturn than there ever is in a buoyant market, because most people lean back. They get scared. They listen to the media.
Attract.
Another golden tip is, don't watch the news, read the newspaper, or listen to it. Stop. I haven't done it for 25 to 30 years. I knew the Queen was dead. I knew all sorts of stuff. That all came to me somehow. But you don't watch that shit, because it's seriously, it's slowing us down. It's making us start to believe the negativity in the environment, the economy, because there is so much opportunity available because people lean back. All these, if there's 1,000 people fishing in the pond, and 700 of them put their lines away and go home, there might be a few less fish, but there's still a lot less people fishing. So if you double down and lean into growing your business, to finding great team, because some people let go of great team and you have an opportunity to find better team members, that strengthens your business. Double down on marketing, focus more on sales, focus on the products that you, or services that you have that have got higher profit margins. So you're doing less, but making more, to give you more time and back and more attention to focus on the right things.
Why do you lean to business? Because again, you have investments in other asset classes, but business is your focus. Why?
I'm a strong believer that you can make more money through business and you hold it in other asset classes, right? Because one of my favourite C words, control. You have control over your business. Once you know how the system of business works, it doesn't matter what business. We've got businesses in our groups, from photography to lawyers to trades to aviation to consultancy to education, you name it, we've had everything. Technology, IT, software, it doesn't matter. We've had just about every single type of business, but we can support them to grow because it's the system of business. It's not about what they sell, it's that system. And so you can apply that to anything. So if you've got a business and you start to get that to a point where it becomes a freedom business, it's running without you, if you go and buy somebody else that they've taken 10 years to build this business, and let's say it's doing, a couple hundred to $200,000 profit, you might buy that business for $400,000 or $500,000, right? If you finance it, you haven't put any of your money in, you finance it over a period of time, it actually makes you profit from day one, right? So if you've got profit from day one, you can then go and invest in other asset classes. And often, and there are good people in each asset class that are out there, genuinely out there to support people to grow their wealth. Like in any industry, you've got sharks in any industry, or people that aren't, necessarily as strong from a values point of view. But there are good operators as well, and those operators still, like anyone, if they're spruiking a product, just be aware if they're the one also selling the product. So if they're selling you a course about a product and then selling you the product, they've got a bias towards that. They're not going to go, come and look at my crypto stuff, and then we've got this crypto exchange, but I think you should buy property. They're not going to do that because that's their business model. Whereas what I focus on is, I'll teach you business. You then go on, if you go and buy another business, I'm not going to get a financial benefit from that. We'll teach you business through what we do, because then you can go and apply that for the rest of your life into any area. And it applies to other investment classes as well, because it's the stage 6, which is the top level of our 6 stages of business, is the investor mindset. It's actually approaching your own business as if you're an investor in that business and it's not yours. How would you make decisions? The emotion would be removed. You'd be making much more decisive decisions as an investor, not emotively driven ones. And so you can then apply that investment mindset to bullion, property, crypto, shares. It doesn't matter. You can apply it to anything because it's a way of thinking, right? Because then if you're thinking in that way, you would then go and look at the data. What am I drawn to? What's my stage of life? What do I enjoy? If I enjoy property, well, I'm going to focus on property. I'm not going to go to crypto. And I'm going to learn more about property so that once I've made my money in business, I can then go and put my money into property.
Wondering before we wrap up if you can speak to emotional decision making, because you and I have known each other long enough to know that you weren't always this calm Buddha of emotionally, neutral decision making.
Yeah. I just look back and I have to shake my head and just go, oh my goodness.
A little bit of cringe.
Every decision, a little bit of cringe, all cringe, complete cringe, because every decision I made was from an emotional place, right? Because I didn't know how to regulate my emotions. I didn't know what I was doing. I was running on fear, adrenaline, nervous system at 13. So every decision, my emotional pendulum was at the top. Like it was probably spinning around, but it was way up here. So every decision I made was from a place where my emotions are up, which means our intelligence goes down. So what I've learnt though now is when I make decisions, is I'm running numbers. I'm a bit of a spreadsheet, and I am a spreadsheet nerd, not a bit
Just
of one.
own it.
I'm a spreadsheet nerd. I love it. Every time there's something, it's like, ooh, spreadsheet it. But that's an amazing skill to develop, because then you can model something and it's like, yeah, I want to go ahead with this thing, and then you look at the numbers and it tells you it's crap, and you're like, okay, I'm not going ahead with this thing. But in the past, I would have gone, I want to go ahead with this thing, and I'd go ahead with it, and then it'd bite me in the backside because the numbers don't stack up. And I made a decision from an emotional place, not from an investor place. Yes, we ultimately, as human beings, still make a decision with some emotion attached. But we do it, if you do it after the data, once the data makes sense, then make the decision from an intuitive, from your gut, using a more, how do you feel about this decision? Yes, this is a great opportunity. Don't go ahead with it because it's a great opportunity. Then once you know it's a great opportunity, then check in and go, how do I feel about this opportunity? Is this a hell yes? Or is it a no? Because a hell yes is 10 out of 10, not 9 out of 10, not 9.5 out of 10. It's 10 out of 10. Yes, it's a hell yes, so I'm going ahead with it. If it's a 9 or an 8, it's a good deal, but it's not the right one because I'm not feeling that.
And so what would you say to the business owners that are out there, that built their business, they're doing, I don't know, $1 million, couple of million in revenue, they've got a team, they're working those stupid hours, maybe they don't have the confidence or the strength to look at the data and in and of themselves make a decision. Maybe that little voice is still saying, oh, go and ask Johnny, ask Sam, ask Sarah.
You have to have a neutral party. They have to come across and quality check it, like come across or red team it. And you say, oh, this is what I want to do, and this is the numbers, and this is why. And if they know you well enough, particularly if you start to build a relationship with somebody and that's who you're working with, if they know you, they're going to start to question, okay, are you sure of that? Because isn't your vision and your mission this and this? How does this actually get you closer? Because to me, it's taking you over here. Oh, yeah, I didn't think of that. Because there's an element of excitement, an element of, oh, I can't lose this opportunity. So if we have someone to stress test it, it'll remove a lot of the emotional decision making because someone else can reflect back to you the emotions that you're not seeing that you're actually experiencing whilst trying to make that decision.
Yeah, powerful. Thanks for sharing your experience.
Pleasure, eh? Thanks.
Big one.
Cheers.